Name's Douglas. Bekah Douglas. I work for a highly refined and secretive organization sometimes referred to as the Crystal Lake Public Library, and today is our final mission into exploring the vast world of poetry. We've talked narratives, sonnets, and free verse, but there's one type of poetry we have yet to explore: spoken word. So today, my fellow agents, we explore our final mission, Mission X. Today, we're looking at Sarah Kay, a popular author and speaker. Our goals are to understand her past, analyze the importance of spoken word poetry, and wrap up our series with some sentimental advice. We start in New York City. Sarah Kay was born in 1988 and raised in New York City to Jewish and Japanese parents. She began performing poetry at the Bowery Poetry Club at the ripe age of 14 and ended up joining their slam poetry team as their youngest member. She began performing internationally for all sorts of venues like the Tribeca Film Festival and the United Nations, where she was featured performer for the launch of the 2004 World Youth Report. When she was 16, she founded her own program entitled Project Voice, which utilizes poetry to entertain, educate, and inspire. According to their current website, they have worked with hundreds of schools in 30 countries, reaching over 1,500 students from kindergarten through university level. Kay's goal was to promote creative collaboration and empower young girls like herself. In 2006, she competed in the National Poetry Slam in Austin, Texas, alongside her team. As an 18-year-old outspoken poet, she garnered a lot of media attention and ended up on national TV the next year on the show Deaf Poetry Jam, where she performed one of her original poems, Hands. In 2011, she released her first book entitled B, which was ranked #1 best-selling poetry book on Amazon. This led her to be a featured speaker at the TED Conference in California on March 3, 2011. She gave an incredibly moving speech about her upbringing and performed 2 of her poems, If I Should Have a Daughter and Hiroshima. She received 2 standing ovations, and her video now sits at almost 6 million views. She has subsequently released 3 more books, No Matter the Wreckage in 2014, which was a collection of her first poems, Type in 2016, which is an illustrated version of her poems by the same name, with drawings by Sophia Janowitz. She released All Our Wild Wonder in 2018, which serves as a tribute to all of her extraordinary teachers in her life and a celebration of learning. More recently, Sarah has been hosting her podcast by the name of Sincerely X, which is produced by TED Talks and Audible. She's also a resident poet for the Paris Review, where she contributes every week. Now, you might be wondering, Bekah, we usually review poets of the past. Sarah's pretty young to be considered a legend. Well, one day, this will be the past, so I say, live and let die. Sarah may be young, but she's already accomplished so much, as that big dump of exposition proved. I wanted to highlight her this week because spoken word poetry is her specialty. But just what is spoken word poetry? Just what it sounds like. It can be written or improvised, it can use slang or rely on rhythm, but most importantly, it's performed in front of a crowd. Some examples of spoken word poetry you might be familiar with are monologues, stories, raps, and even stand-up comedy. It became popular with the American Beat Poet movement that took place in the 40s and 50s, where authors in New York City used their work to promote American culture. To better understand spoken word poetry, let's examine one of Sarah Kay's own poems, Scaffolding. I learned things don't happen and then disappear. Once they happen, they still are here, and you can move on and forget them, but they still exist somewhere. So no matter how far you leave them, they still wait for you there. So, not too terribly different from what we've heard before. Our same basic rhyme schemes and rhythmic patterns. But listen to the way she performs the poem. This is a clip from 2008 at the Bowery Poetry Club. So, she's turned the poem into a musical performance. She's letting the melody move you just as much as the words. I'm definitely a music gal, so I was very touched by her vulnerability within the performance. I think that's the main element of spoken word. Vulnerability. Bringing a story about your childhood or self-written song in front of others is very nerve-wracking and scary, but you're giving away a part of yourself and taking that risk that makes it good art. If every artist never stepped from within their comfort zone, we'd have no change and nothing worth remembering. Sarah Kay, Gwendolyn Brooks, Poe, Shakespeare, all people worth remembering because at one point they took a risk to share their work with the world so we could hear it, and I think we're better because of it. Oh, you guys are still here. Well, we had some close calls today, but as it turns out, it was not mission impossible. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it was mission possible. Let's close our series with a very fitting quote from Miss Kay. I use poetry to help me work through what I don't understand, but I show up to each new poem with a backpack full of everywhere else I've been. And now, you can too.